Hello, I'm Christopher Kenworthy and welcome to Creative Aspect Ratio. The frame size that we're all used to looking at on our widescreen TVs and on YouTube is called 16:9. I wouldn't worry too much about the numbers, it just means it's 16 units wide by 9 units high. There are lots of different ways that people name the frame sizes, but rather than worrying about the maths, I'll just show you the main ones that you're going to use and how they can be used and the effect they have on the look and feel of your film. One of the benefits of 16:9 is it's something we're all very familiar with. It was once called widescreen because it was wider than the traditional square television image. When video cameras first came about, this square image was what we usually worked with. Gradually, 16:9 was brought in and became the standard as widescreen TVs became available. It's easy to frame two people in a 16:9 frame, and it works well on TVs and on YouTube, so it's often what people choose. If you look here, you'll see black bars at the top and bottom, and that's because this is an aspect ratio called 1:185, sometimes just called 185. And this is used in cinemas when people want to go for something that's quite widescreen but not ultra widescreen. And they also know that they can just expand this a little and it's going to fit into a 16:9 TV quite well, as you can see here. I'm just raising the scale so that it fits the screen and there's not much difference at all. But the ultra wide screen is known as 235. You'll often hear people also say 239 or 240. And if you just put the maths aside, people are actually referring to the same widescreen look. So when you bring your footage into your software, you can set it to 1 to 235, and this is the look you'll get. As you can see, this does look very cinematic, but it can also mean that the frame is a little crowded. We're now very, very close to the actor's face. So you have to make sure you take this into account when you're shooting. When you go for ultra widescreen, you'll find that you often want to be further back than this. And when you are in this close, it means that the viewers are really going to be concentrating on the looks in those actors' eyes. It's a very different effect to standard 16:9. But because you shot in 16:9, you can actually move the image up or down within the frame. If you look here, I'm gradually moving the image up so that her eye line moves up the frame. There's no actual camera move there, but it looks like there is. So look at this shot and we'll compare it in its 16:9 format to how it looks when we've attempted to make it more cinematic. When you look at this, there's nothing wrong with it. The camera tilts up with the motion of the book there, and then the camera moves backwards on a dolly and the whole room is revealed. But the problem in a way is that when the actor appears that small, she's almost isolated in the frame. If she's still the focus, we want that feeling of space in a wide room, but we don't want her to look too small within it. So in the finished graded widescreen version, everything looks just about the same here. It's a little more cinematic, but then as we pull back, we still get this sense of space and width, but she doesn't look too small within the frame. She's still obviously the subject of the shot and hasn't vanished from it. And sometimes widescreen just looks better. This shot was done with widescreen in mind, and in 16:9 it looks fine, but when we go to ultra widescreen, it just looks that much more cinematic. It feels like you're watching something at the cinema. And even if this were loaded up onto YouTube, by having the black bars at the top and bottom, it's going to feel as though you're watching something in the cinema. But when you're shooting, you have to know in advance what your aspect ratio is going to be. Let's say we'd set up this framing here for 16:9, and then we decide in post-production that we want that cinematic look of widescreen. If you just apply the widescreen filter, this might now be too close. It might feel a little cramped, and that's not really the composition we set up. There's nothing wrong with it, but if we'd actually been looking at a widescreen monitor, we would probably have shot this very differently. You can see when we move the camera further back that this is much more suited to a widescreen look. And if you go even further back, you begin to see the actor's whole body movement and you see the potential of the widescreen frame. It is a different way of shooting. You're less likely to use a lot of close-ups and more likely to see the actor within the location that you've chosen. Thankfully, with many cameras and monitors, you'll get an overlay on the screen which shows you exactly where the widescreen lines are. So here I can see that that is an extreme close-up, and that all that's going to be left when we're finished are his eyes and mouth. We're not really going to see the top of his head or his chin. So if you have a camera or monitor that gives you this ability, you should definitely use it. And you have to remember that you can allow things like booms and lights to appear in the frame, as long as they don't come below those guidelines for the finished shot. If your camera doesn't have any guides, then you can just put some tape on the camera. It doesn't have to be completely accurate, it just gives you an overview of how the final shot might look. I'll often put some sticky tape like this and just colour it in with a marker pen, and it means that when I look through this, I get an idea of what the final shot will be. And by using transparent tape with a little bit of marker pen over it, I can still see what's above and below those guidelines. The aspect ratio you choose has an enormous effect on the final look of your film, so always consider it as you shoot.